That was Cheap Regrets by the Districts there. Another cool track. It is one of those songs that I think doesn't really matter the occasion. You could listen to it.
Yeah, it's one of those real songs that kind of I can chuck on at any point and kind of really like enjoy. And I think the reason is because it's one of those very few songs I find where it's obviously trying to tell a story of what's gone on. And it's, he's a bit grumpy. He's a bit grumpy in that song. But it's not so overpowering that you think I could only listen to this when I was really annoyed at someone. Like, I think that's the reason that there's quite a few songs out there, like more heavier songs that I listen to that are very kind of emotionally based for me. Like, I can't be having a good day and listen to Idols. It just doesn't. I have to be kind of tired, grumpy, and kind of like, yeah, now I'm gonna listen to some punk because it just if I try and like be chirpy, and then I've got like any like really heavy song going through me, it's like this is a weird counterbalance that I don't like much.
But that one, like that song sounds like it's on a FIFA soundtrack if it's not already.
I would not be surprised if it's going to be on the next FIFA soundtrack. I would not be surprised if that's where people will find it. Um, that's a big thing. That's a big thing about my music taste from when I was a bit younger, like start of uni and when I was like 16, 17, is I tell people about songs that I really liked, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that on FIFA." Like I never played FIFA, but so many people would be like, "Oh, I've heard that. Yeah, I had it on FIFA." And I'd be like, "Oh,
It's got a
cool."
there's a certain mood I think that gets songs on a FIFA soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's kind of high energy enough that it will never make you sleepy, but so so timid enough that again, as you were saying, it's not going to put you in a mood, you know.
Yeah, it's that middle ground, and I also find with FIFA and those ones, it's like big enough band that someone might have heard them, not big enough that the sync rights is going to be like unbelievably expensive. You know what I mean? Like, because um, it's one of those ones. It also really reminds me of another song.
It's always pre-debut album, and
Yeah, it's always pre-debut album. It's always like the single that came out before the debut album, and the sync rights alone
yeah,
for like FIFA were what then allowed them to go and make the debut album, but then no one goes and listens to it because they only want the one song from FIFA. Um,
I mean, that kind of happened to me with Imagine Dragons because they
yeah,
had that song on top of the world, which was on FIFA, and then their first album I thought was actually really good. Then they kind of deteriorated for me,
yeah.
but
I had the same experience, but not with
it happened.
FIFA. I had the same experience with Two Door Cinema Club because one of their
Mm.
remixes was on the last SSX game, which is like that snowboarding one.
Ah, right,
And I remember being
yeah.
like, "Oh, I love this track. I love this track." And then going and listening to like Two Door Cinema Club and finding the remix and being like, "Oh my god, it's this." And then I became a Two Door Cinema Club fan for like most of my teens. So it was a very kind of that was a very kind of big moment for me. It's
You still listen to our Cinema Club, or
I
was that just the teen thing you listened
I
to?
occasionally go back and listen to them, yeah. I remember really loving them when I was younger, and I remember really loving a lot of those kind of indie bands, and some of them I still really do. But I go back and listen to them sometimes, and I do think with them, it's you love them when you loved them, and then when you go back and listen to them, you realize every single song is basically the same. That first
Yeah,
album is incredible, but they do sound so, so similar that you do kind of get 4 tracks in and think, oh, I've heard this before. Like, I'd rather not
yeah.
go get to the end. A band that didn't happen with, a band that I used to listen to when I was, 12, 11, and still listen to daily now is um, Bombay Bicycle Club. And I think a lot of people know
Sticking
me.
with the clubs, but not
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
the
clubs.
same.
I love clubs. Uh, and a lot of people who know me know my like sheer love for Bombay Bicycle Club. I remember they are in my top 5 best bands of all time, and another amazing gig, you know, on par. Plausibly not as good as seeing Joe Hisashi in Prague, but another gig that was really influential in kind of me loving music was last year, around about this time last year. I went to go and see them in Bath for their debut album. Kind of, it'd been out for 10 years, so they did this gig where they're like, we're going to do our debut album and we're going to play it from start to finish. And I remember going, and I wasn't in a great place at the time. I was a bit kind of like down in the dumps, and I was a bit just not having particularly a great headspace. And I remember going, and all of my pent up emotion just being let out because their first album is so kind of raw and kind of rocky. And then coming out afterwards and being like, whoa, that was kind of like therapy in a way. Like this is something I've always wanted to see live, and I got to see it. And then I let out all of my emotion in it, and then kind of came out like, yeah, I feel so much better for no reason, but it worked.
Replenished, rejuvenized.
Yeah, you know, like it was a real kind of, and I was front row, and I was really close with the band. I could see them, and they were rocking out. And I remember there's a very specific song from that album that really kind of just encapsulate the emotion I was in at that time, and I use it often. Actually, it was a huge influence on the structure and the writing for my band's first single, which was Video Game. Like that second section of Video Game was basically completely influenced by this track. That kind of sense of, you know, if you've heard it, we do this thing where we go from being very quite soft to out of the nowhere, loads of things going on, and then soft again. And that was basically just this track did that, and we looked at it and thought, yeah, we're going to do that. We want to do that in a song. This is an amazing track. And to this day, it is one of my favorite tracks of all time. I listen to it all the time and just think, God, it's so well written. It is called Lamplight, and it's from their first album, called I Had the Blues, but I Shook Them Loose.
If you've got a feeling that you can't put into words, don't worry, friends,
'cause there's a song for that.